Okay, so I think we're a couple minutes early. I'll just introduce. This is Kyle Buchanan. He's a senior web developer at Blue Cross Blue Shield with me. We've been kind of moving towards using a lot of Angular. He started using some Yeoman to kind of bootstrap some projects, so we figured this was a good venue for him to present a little bit on both those things. He'll probably tell you about Triangle JavaScript if you guys haven't been a part of the meetup. He's newly replaced, or
newly minted organizer.
After Lucas Myers, the previous main organizer, is moving west. So Kyle will be a good contact if you're interested in the JavaScript meetup. And I guess I'll let you.
Well, we're going to be doing the same thing on the 30th of July, so probably no point in attending if you're here today. But unless you want to hang out with other JavaScript developers.
And it is a good. Who here is interested in the JavaScript meetup at all? Okay. Yeah. So it is a really good place to network with other people who are doing front-end development. I mean, I got my job at Blue Cross kind of because of going to it. So if you're on the market for a job, it's a good way to network for people who are hiring and things like that.
And recruiters always show up whether we want them to or not. There's no way to kind of keep them out. But
if there are any
recruiters here, sorry.
And so this is one in hopefully following up with more Google technologies. I just recently kind of started using Go, so we'll probably try to do some different things, not just front end, but back end. And if you're not part of the group or the Google Plus community or anything like that, I would recommend it. I've tried, anyone who's kind of said they came to the event, I tried to add so that you're aware of anything we're doing. You can always ignore us. That's the beauty of Google Plus, I guess. But without further ado, I'll let Kyle take it. And if we have time, I'll go over Pro Maps. If not, all the slides and stuff are going to be on GitHub.
Yeah, well, they're already there.
They are on GitHub.
So he stole the points from my first slide. Other than, I guess the one thing is, so I've only been developing with Angular for about 7 months. I mean, it's pretty new. It took me a while to get around to Angular because I was messing around with a bunch of other frameworks. So finally took the jump and I haven't looked back. So I guess first off, how many people have actually developed something in Angular, or at least have kicked the tires on Angular? There's a few. Okay, so I guess the other question, because I really need to gauge you guys, based on my slides, I need to get an idea as to the sort of experience that people have had. JavaScript MVC frameworks, like Backbone or Sammy, I think is, well, that's more of a routing one, but is Ember or Knockout, and then whatever. You know, pick a word, and I'm sure there's a JavaScript library for it. Anyway, so yeah, I've been doing this for about 7 months, and this is really not smooth. Anyway, all right. So this is kind of a 4-part talk that I've got. It's kind of an intro to Angular, and then we'll do just a little bit of coding just to kind of show you how Angular works. And then we'll take a look at Yeoman, which if you guys haven't heard of Yeoman or haven't used it, highly recommend it. You can get applications built in no time with Yeoman. And the nice thing about Yeoman is that there's an Angular generator for Yeoman. So working with Yeoman and Angular, it just kind of goes together. And then we'll do at the very end a little bit of Angular coding with Yeoman. And I hope to show something that I built last week. I think it's pretty cool, and I hope you guys think so too. So, all right. So Angular. What is it all? Yeah. So Angular, the way Google sort of describes Angular is that it's the next iteration of HTML. So the way the guys were thinking about Angular is that JavaScript applications are becoming pretty much the norm on the web. I mean, they're showing up everywhere. They're showing up on phones. I mean, you've got PhoneGap, you've got Node, so you've got JavaScript all over the place. And the way the guys at Google were thinking about it is that, so let's pretend that you could do all of those cool things that you do in JavaScript just straight in the HTML. Say you wanted to create components, a panel or something, create your own HTML tags. You can do that in Angular. So yeah, as my first point there, you can use the HTML, your templates right within your code. You don't have to store your templates off in external files and then compile them and throw a JSON object in there, that kind of thing. The number one feature I see is the two-way data binding. So as your model updates, your view will update, and as your view updates, your model updates, it all just happens, and you don't have to do anything about it. It's all wired up. You just let Angular do its magic. Another big point that Angular really stresses is structure and testing. So there's I'm coming from sort of a backbone type world where don't pass the cookies without taking one. I don't want to take all this all the time. Yeah, she doesn't want to eat all of those. So with like I said, I was coming from a backbone background, I guess. I don't know if you can say that because backbone hasn't been around that long, but backbone is like the wild, wild west. However you want to make it happen, you can. The structure is left up to the developer. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to build backbone applications. With Angular, it's a little bit more rigid. They encourage certain best practices. They encourage you to name files a certain way. They encourage you to use services to perform a particular function. And then the last sort of cool thing with Angular is dependency injection. So if you've worked with require.js, this should be very similar, where you will only load the different modules as you need them. So it's also a nice way to pass data around. So let's say you created a data object, and you wanted two different pieces of code to both share that same data object. By injecting that data into both of these pieces of code, they both share the same thing. It's a singleton, and it all just, once again, works nice. There's a lot of magic that happens with Angular, and I've been really impressed by it. So I took kind of a cynical, but a negative approach to this presentation because like I mentioned earlier, Angular was something that everyone was talking about. You kept seeing it pop up all over the place, and you just couldn't ignore it. So when I first took a look at it, I was looking for a reason to not use it. And so these 5 points, we're just going to kind of step through these 5 points, and hopefully they'll just sort of set your mind at ease. And then we'll get really excited about it, and we'll show you how it works. So if anybody has experienced or has worked with Angular, there's an obvious steep learning curve. It's something where the nomenclature is completely new. There's just different ways of doing things, and if you're working with other frameworks, all those ideas and patterns that you've used, you need to kind of push them aside and try to go the Angular way. One thing that really ticked me off is every time I looked at an example, everything was put in the global scope, and that really bothered me. But we'll get to that. Custom attributes. I mean, come on, that's like adding an on-click or an on-mouse over or on-mouse up to a tag is something everyone is trying to get away from, because jQuery comes along, and now you're adding events using jQuery with selectors and things like that. Well, we're going to take a step back into the early, I guess, 2000s, late 1990s. I don't know when it actually came about because I was in high school and I didn't care about this stuff back then. But two-way data binding. How is this happening? What's going on? Why is it when I change the data, why does it magically populate my view with what I wanted to show without having to do any sort of jQuery selector and telling it that it needs to have the HTML, like pass in a string of HTML to it. It just kind of does things. And then the last thing, passing data around an application. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Events, global objects, all that kind of stuff. I was just curious, how does Angular solve that problem? All right, so the steep learning curve. If you've been to the Angular website, you know the documentation is horrible. I mean, well, it's actually not that bad. It was really bad when I first started using it, and it started to get a lot better. And actually, there's an initiative by the guys working on Angular to update the documentation. So hopefully, sometime soon, we'll get better documentation. The nomenclature, I wasn't sure. You know, I had an idea what a service was, but I was thinking more of a service as sort of a call to a back-end web service. Well, they use services in a bunch of different ways to pass data around from like controller to another controller. They've got this new thing called a directive. I have no idea what that was. And then here's a factory. Believe it or not, and someone call me out on this if they know better. Factory and service are sort of interchangeable. So sometimes you hear people talking about a factory, and then other times people are talking about a service. Well, they're the same thing, but you don't know that by looking in the documentation. And then injection. If you haven't used required before, you may not know what injection is. That was thinking me. And like I said, I was using Backbone a lot. I had been using Backbone for over a year. I had gotten used to certain patterns, and you need to separate yourself from some of those other libraries and just focus on doing things the Angular way. But the one big bonus in all of this is that the typical MV, and they call it an MVW, I think they call it model view whatever, those patterns still apply. I mean, if you've worked with model view controller before, this should all be somewhat familiar to you. And if you haven't worked with it before, it'll make sense to you when I show you an example. So the second point, I think, on my list of 5 was why do they put everything in the global scope? And I'm pretty sure it's purely for simplicity, just to get the point across that they're trying to teach you in the documentation. So if you've ever built or used an immediately invoked function expression, that's just a quick way to safeguard your code against adding something to the global scope. And this is actually does not pass lint because my 2 parentheses. Actually, I think I can use my mouse here. These 2 parentheses need to be, stand up and do this. These 2 need to be inside there. Oh, see that? Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah. Is it my way off right now? Are people following me? Yes. Okay. And if I need to slow down or repeat something, please let me know. Please ask questions as I go along. I actually did this presentation for my wife last night. She sat through it, and she's a designer, so I think I hit the mark with this presentation because she understood what I was saying, but she's also my wife, so I'd like to think she'd understand what I was saying. All right, this one was a big one for me. Using custom attributes, doing things like ng-click. So if anytime when you're working with Angular, if you see ng, just know that stands for Angular. So just take off the A and you've got ng, then remove the UL-AR. Anyway, so ng- something means Angular. The bad thing about, as a JavaScript developer, you know that adding on mouse over, on click, typically you're creating functions that are put into the global scope at that point. If you say on mouse over, run a function called highlight or something like that, typically that would have been in your global scope. Not a good idea. The thing that's really nice about Angular is that you'll see there's an ng-controller there. So anything in that ng-controller gets its own scope. So I guess it's on this, if you follow me with that. So the do something function is not actually on the global scope. It's in the scope of the result list controller that I've set up there. So if I had another controller on the screen that also had a do something function on it, it could do something completely different. But this particular do something, if you were to quickly glance at my code here and you were a developer that was cleaning up all of my mistakes, you would know that, okay, I need to go find a controller that says result list controller, and then I'll find a method on there that's called do something. So it's just quick and clean, and I think it gives a lot more insight to another developer as you're collaborating on projects. So the third point, two-way data binding. You know, what's really going on here? So I put a link to the data binding in AngularJS, so that goes to their documentation. It's we'll probably take a look at the documentation in a bit, but so let's say I had a page that had this HTML right here in the middle where it says welcome and then curly brace username. That's my template. That's my template within my HTML. If you've worked with any of the other templating engines like Handlebars or Underscore, there's a jQuery templating engine, you know that anything that goes in those double curly braces is going to refer to some sort of variable or property. So since in this case, I've got a controller called user controller, and on that scope, I set a property called username, and it's decimate the week. It's a song by a metal band I like. Winds of Plague, if anybody listens to. Anyway, when this runs, when this actually shows up on the screen, it's just going to show welcome decimate the week. And to wire that up, I didn't have to, like I was saying earlier, I didn't have to push a JSON object to a template that then needed to be rendered, which then needed to be passed in to like a jQuery HTML function to then populate my view. So it just magically happens. Fourth thing that I was wondering about is, maybe this is my fifth, I don't remember, but so how are we going to get data and pass around the application? In my previous experience with working with JavaScript applications, I was creating global objects. I was using event listeners. I was using other libraries. I think one that I used was written by a guy named Scott Gonzalez. I can't even remember what it's called. Amplify. So Amplify's got a nice, I guess, sort of pub sub library that you can use. The thing with Angular is they create these things called services, and here's where I was talking about earlier, where service and factory are sort of interchangeable. So if you were to create a service in Angular, I've got this module here which is called my app, and then on my app I'm going to create a factory called center service, and this is just a tiny little bit of code from a urgent care finder that I'm building for Blue Cross. So I would create this object called my center service. It has a centers property on it, or centers method on it, which would go and make an AJAX call, bring back some JSON, populate the centers. It would return my centers, and then by returning the center service, I've then made the center service.centers public. So if I wanted to inject this service into any one of my controllers, they're all going to have access to all the data that's on that center service. And you can do really cool things with properties in Angular where you can watch properties. And when you put a watch on any property, anytime that property changes, by watching it, you know Angular will notify you that that property has changed. So if I've got a whole bunch of controllers that care about the fact that I got data back from my center service, like let's say I've got a list of centers on the I guess on the left side of the page, and then I've got my map view on the right side of the page where I want to populate a dot for every single one of those. The list and the map can not care about each other. They're both using the same data because I've injected my service into both. So and at any point when the centers, if they were to update for whatever reason, both would update independently from each other, yet they're sharing the same data, because the way services work in Angular is they create a singleton that is just it's instantiated when the application runs. So it's pretty cool. And like I said, please call me out if I'm saying something incorrectly. Don't bite your tongue. All right, so here's a bonus time. Angular has a couple other really cool features. Well, actually it has a lot of cool features, but some of the ones that have really stood out to me are these things called filters, looping in a template, and another one that's called nghide, or I guess the opposite isngshow. So with filters are super cool. Within my template, let's say I wanted to, here's another example from my urgent care center application. So they just send me this string of, they send me the phone number in this format where it's like open parentheses 919, close parentheses, space, 3 numbers, hyphen, 4 numbers. Well, if you've ever worked on mobile and have used the TEL protocol, you know that's not going to work because it's got all that extra junk in there. So I created a filter that would take out all of the extraneous stuff, so I would just have that raw number. And so using Angular and creating a phone filter, I've written this regular expression that looks for all that stuff, puts a 1 on the front, and returns it. So I would get my poorly formatted phone number for a URL, apply a filter using the pipe. So this would then run this function and return my raw number. And then by not applying the filter, when you actually see what's inside the A tag, you would get the unfiltered. So it's just a nice way of being able to sort of manipulate with just by doing piping and putting a filter on it. And you can use those anywhere. You can use any of those filters throughout your templates. Some of the ones that Angular's got built in are like lowercase or uppercase. So if you currency is a cool one. Yeah. So if you get you got a dollar amount that has, I don't know, 8 decimal places after that because you did some crazy calculation on it. If you applied the currency filter, it would round it to the correct cent, and it would be 0.01 or point however many cents. So they've got a bunch of filters that are built in automatically, and you can write as many filters as you want. Call them whatever you want, do whatever you want with them. Okay, you wrote this. Luke wrote this piece of code, and I was looking at it yesterday, and I didn't understand what you were doing. I think the point that you're trying to get across is that you can also use filters to order things. So if you had which I don't think that's right, but because is order by a filter?
This one was to do
alphabetical group name or group names, I think is what you're trying to do. So I think in the example he was getting a list of groups within that have Blue Cross insurance, and he wanted to put them in a alphabetical order. So the important thing to know here is that he's got a group service. Here's the watch that I was talking about earlier. So he's watching this particular property on the group service. He wants to know when something's happened to it. So when it comes back, if he has a bunch of groups, it doesn't come back as empty, then he's going to set it on his scope, and then he wants to order these by the group name. So in this array of data that would come back, there would be a property on each object in that array called group name. And so down here, he's using this ngRepeat, which I'll cover here in a second, but this would iterate over every single object in that array. And by applying this order by filter on it, it just does it. It just takes all those names, those group names, and puts them in an alphabetical order based on the fact that he said he wanted to. So that order prop actually corresponds to that order prop that he's got set there. Can you guys see that?
I think that was, so just to clarify, so it's actually a table, and I think there's some code missing here. So if you click on the the name of the property.
That's right.
It orders it,
Right.
and then the filter is the one that.
Yeah, so there's a much more complex example that I stripped out and didn't check with you first. All right, looping. This is a pretty cool one. Looping in Angular is a piece of cake. You use this. This is the word directive, I think. So you would use the ng-repeat directive. So let's say I've got on my scope, I've got an array of results, and those are just a bunch of JSON objects. This is just like a for loop, which you guys should be familiar with. So I'm going to have my, I would hope. Sorry. So I've got this results array, and as I iterate over that, with each iteration of that loop, we're going to create a local variable here called result, and then that result is going to correspond to results 0 or results 1, results 2 in my array. And then each result is going to have like an org name or an address or a city or a postal code. So I would just put this in my HTML. That would just live in my HTML, and it just works. So yeah, decimated. And then nghide. Blue Cross and Blue Shield has conditions left and right. I mean, we've got, if you're over 65, under 65, under 18, over 18, under 26, with dental, without dental, you name it, we've got the condition for it. So nghide is another directive that we can use. So based on a particular property on my scope or a method, the result of that method, whether it's true or false, will determine whether this thing shows or hides. So in this case, if you are outside of North Carolina and you're using my urgent care finder, you're not going to find any urgent care centers in the state that you're in because you're outside North Carolina. So I'm just going to say, hey, are you outside North Carolina? Call this phone number and we'll give you some help. So I have a method on my scope called outside NC, which will, based on your geolocation, will run some routine that uses the Google Maps. I guess which service? I don't remember which one it is. The geolocation service. Geocode, yeah. So I would geocode their location and figure out if they're in NC or not. So I like nghide, and the other one isngshow. If you're one of those people who writes. Some people write things to always come out false, and some people write things to always come out negative as their conditions. It's really up to you.
Those actually remove the markup.
They don't remove the markup. It puts a display none on them. There is a way to remove the markup though. There's a project out there called, pretty sure it's called Angular. Is it Angular UI? I think. So what that would do is it would actually remove, or it may not remove it. It might comment it out. It won't actually take it out of the markup, though. You'd have to use some server-side language for that. Probably, I don't know if you're using PHP or whatever, but if you have any really sensitive data that you really don't want people to find, this is not the route to go. Okay, so that kind of wraps up my, I guess, intro to Angular. I'm going to do something. A quick demo that shows how sort of the data binding works, and we'll iterate over a result set. But I wanted to mention a couple of resources here. Obviously, the Angular documentation, like I said, it's kind of hit or miss, but they've got comments on there, so there's a lot of people that have experienced the same issue that you're going to have, so you'll see those in the comments. Egghead. So there's a website, egghead.io, which is full of Angular videos, and they're all like 5 minutes long. And this is really sad. Sometimes before I go to bed at night, I wind down by watching a couple Angular videos. This one's cool, AngularJS ebook. The guys who wrote Angular have put out a free ebook. Just click on the link and you can go download it. And then the AngularJS community on Google Plus is really active. My Google Plus feed is just, it's maybe something from from you about your kid, and then the rest is Angular stuff. So, any questions so far about Angular? I'm sure you guys just want to see something. So, I guess if you don't mind, if you'll just bear fly. How's that sound?
I think what we'll do, Kyle, after you do some examples, we'll take a brief intermission.
So I'm using Sublime Text 2. It's the kind of the editor of choice right now. And if you haven't hooked up the Emmet/Zencoding plugin with your Sublime Text 2 installation, I highly recommend it because you can do cool things like or HTML:5, hit tab, and oh man, there's all this cool stuff. And the other thing that I would highly recommend is that applications, and if you, I hope you're doing this with your jQuery projects or any other project, you're using the Google CDN. Once again, another Google plug. So there we go. So if you haven't been to the Google hosted libraries, you'll see they've got a whole bunch of things in here. jQuery, jQuery UI, MooTools, which was my first venture into a JavaScript library. So I'm just going to grab the code or the library here. Since I'm not on a server, I need. Oh yeah, sorry. Let's do this. And to show this. All right, so we've got, and I'll even open up developer tools. I haven't made a mistake. And if I do make a mistake, developer tools will scream at me. So the first thing I wanted to do is kind of show you the how you would build just the beginning of an Angular application. And with Angular namespace, and I'm going to create a call it test. And I hate the word app. My mom asked me, what apps do you have on your phone? And that's when I said, I'm not using the word app anymore. To tell Angular where I want my application to be, you use the ng-app directive, and you would give it a string. You would provide it a name. In this case, I called it test app. And then when you're creating an Angular a module, you would then tell it to use the same name as the application. What's cool about this is you can have multiple Angular applications running on the same page. So if you are working on a project right now and you think, you know what, Angular is pretty cool, let me apply it to just this particular section of my web page, you can just add that ng-app directive to that particular chunk of HTML, and then your app is confined to, I said app again, their application is confined to that particular block of code. So yeah, let me finish this up. Not totally clear on the parameters here. I'm pretty sure this second parameter here is if I wanted to throw in some other dependencies or something like that, but does anybody else know? Yeah, you can, but I tried that at work today, injecting things directly into my my module level part, and I was running into some problems. I was probably just doing something wrong. Anyway, so and you can see that down here at the bottom of the developer tools, I've loaded Angular and I don't have any errors. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and create a controller, and then I'm going to do something. I'm going to, like I showed earlier with the username, I'm going to create a scope level variable or property called username, populate, and then populate a template. And one of the comments my wife made last night is, wow, this looks like an awful lot of setup here at the beginning just to do a simple thing. Well, yeah, it is, but once you get over this first little hump, then you can just fly. So, all right, I'm going to create a div here. And I'm going to, one of the things that I was mentioning earlier where Angular, they encourage best practices, or they encourage to do things in a certain pattern. Whenever you're creating a controller, they would like for you to end it with capital CTRL. So when you're looking at your code, you know that even though it's got the directive ng-controller, it's pretty clear that what we're dealing with here is a controller. So to watch my controller, and then I'm going to run a. All right, that's a lot. It's one of those things, just memorize it. Just get used to it. Every time you create a controller, you're going to do the same thing. Just get used to it. So on this particular controller, in this particular scope, set a username property. So within my HTML, if I wanted to display that username, can anyone tell me what I might do? Covered this earlier. There you go. All right. Hello. Oh my goodness. Oh, you guys don't. That stinks. I'm sorry. Anyway, so that was pretty easy.
Kyle, what does it do with the username?
It was not defined. There's nothing. But that's okay.
No, go comment out scope.
Oh.
Here's it.
I don't see any. What are you doing? Okay, so that was pretty cool. Took a property and put it into a template. One of the other things I wanted to show you guys is how to iterate over an array or a result set. So let's say I wanted to, for whatever reason, this is a page about me, and I want to list my favorite JavaScript libraries or something like that. They may or may not. Don't get angry if I don't list your favorite. Obviously, Jake. Must participate in Movember this year. Blue Cross is. I think we're going to do right. We had like 20 people last year. I think we're going to try to get the most of the company to participate this year. So, all right. So I've got this an array of strings. I've got 4 things in there. If I wanted to show you what my favorite libraries are. Again, Zen coding in action. We would use to iterate over a result set. You would just use the ng-repeat directive. Earlier, each time you iterate over once you do a loop in the array, you can create this local variable and then use that local variable to display whatever it is that you want to display. So I'm going to call it variable I want to create as library. On the screen. And voila. All right, so that that kind of shows you how we go one way. We've gone one way here. We've taken data from my controller and we've pushed it to my view. Well, what if I wanted to take my view and then tell my controller to change something? So the demonstrate that is to use an input field, where using that input field, I'm going to try to override what the username property is that I've got down there at the bottom. So we'll create a text field here. And I'm just going to delete these. So input fields, select boxes, radio, I guess they're called controls. I think that's the proper term for any sort of user input that you would use on a web page. They all can have these things called models attached to them. And so by using the ng model directive, you can then wire up that model to a particular property within your scope. So I've got a username property down here at the bottom. And if I want my input to modify that username property, I could set that, I could use that property in my model. So if I did ng, this is going to be really cool. I'm really excited for you guys to see this. When I refresh the page, can anyone take a guess as to what you would see on the input field? What you might see? You should see, yeah, you would. As long as I did everything right, we should see Kyle Buchanan show up as a pre-pop within the input field. So that's pretty cool. And now to show you that it really is wired up and that it really does populate things on the fly, I can start deleting. Oh, I'm going to decimate this, and it's actually not working right now. That's.
You can't type in.
No, it's not. Model off, and let's just make sure I'm. Can I? I can't. Wow, I cannot. Type in this input field. That? I don't think you have to do that. Well, okay, apparently you need to do that. Yeah, I'm in a body tag. Huh, well, I have not, maybe I need to go and update all my input fields on everything I've built because I'm not. Anyway, so let me put the model name or something on it. I don't know. It worked fine. Anyway, so if I were to, so I think in this quick little demonstration, I hope I was able to show you how data binding kind of works, and how to use a template within your HTML. I didn't go and I didn't create any additional files, or I mean, I could put this on an external file if I wanted to, but I think it's pretty cool. This part right here is what made me jump ship, and I was like, you know what, I got to go this route. And one other thing, let me show you this one other really cool feature is if I were to delete this part, this scope username Kyle Buchanan, and then I wanted to, this will still work. So as I update this input, it's going to create that property on my scope, even though I didn't do that in the code, and it's still going to populate what the username is. So if I refresh the page here, it's magic. Gosh, I love this stuff. So, all right, this is sort of I guess the end of the first half of what I've got to show tonight. The next part is using Yeoman with Angular. Yeoman is a great tool. We'll get into it. And then at the very end, I hope to use Yeoman to build an application really fast for you. I've got a couple gists on GitHub that should hopefully speed things along. So,
Yeah,
do you want to take a break?
Have you tried running the Angular app on IE?
Yeah, it works.
It works?
Yeah, IE7 is supported. IE6, no. There's a couple of things that you need to do to make it work. So, like if you were to create your own custom HTML tags,
Yeah, you can name it something.
there's just like a couple of things that you have to do with IE to get that to work. But there's like a whole page on the documentation on how to do that.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, because at Blue Cross we have to support IE7 to 10.
Yeah, same thing.
Chrome, Firefox, Safari, you name it. So, I love it.
So are you using built-in or AngularJS RESTful?
Yeah,
I haven't done that yet. So far, I've just been using the HTTP. I think they call it. Well, they've got a. It's a. I don't know if it's called a directive. Or, yeah.
That's what the whole thing is built on, right?
I haven't really gotten into it that much.
I haven't either. I'm just curious about what kind of trouble you can get into.
Well, you know, there's actually something just today that I was messing around with where if you don't have it, the HTTP, let me make sure I call this the right thing. The HTTP service posts a payload. So if you give it a data object, it's gonna put a payload out there for you. So if you've got a server that's not ready to, if it's looking for key value pairs, it's not gonna get it. It's gonna get a JSON object. So you have to, and it's really kludgy, you have to go in and change the headers on your request to say content type is URL encoded. And then you have to, some people have been using jQuery and the params function to then, take those key value pairs, URL encode them, and then put them into a string. I found actually it's probably when they
some of the controller method.
Yeah, I was having trouble with like simple to do.
we were using.
You have // to do. Yes,
Oh yeah, I ran into that.
and then, but all JSs don't capture that. A lot of editors don't care, and the new editors, new JS.
Are you using Sublime Text?
This is Sublime. I've been doing Sublime Text with brackets.
I need to check out brackets. I've seen because Raymond Camden, a guy that works for Adobe, has been working on that, and he's contributed a bunch to it. I saw a demo of it last fall.
So to that, I sent a pull request to update it. It was had a bug, so I was having this like I had it like fix it, give you the
Have they gotten back to you yet?
Yeah.
They pulled it?
Well, I think what they did, they included it into like the source code, and there was a discussion about like which not included, which make it a module, like a get module, and they just link to Douglas for stuff because now he's on Git, so it's now to this is I guess but back last year he recently joined Git.
Oh, okay.
So now you can do Git sub module and then just sub like it's a symbolic link to your stuff. But I told him like if there's problems like this, like a lot of people don't have their globals or their.
Yeah. All right.
Good cookies.
You guys can all send my wife an email saying thanks for the. I think they're oatmeal chocolate chip.
They're really go on the event and be like.
I actually, this is the first time she's. I think this might be the first time she's made these, and she's watching right now or listening at home. So I need to be careful what I say here. And actually, in this next part, she said, and she's going to hate me for this, she said, when you show them this, I don't want you to tell them that I had any part to do in this because you changed something, and I don't like the way it looks now, and it's ugly, and I don't want people thinking that's what the work I produce. So we'll get to that. All right, Yeoman. Who here has heard of Yeoman? Handful of people. Who has used Yeoman? All right, I've made the switch to use Yeoman like all the time now, and hopefully with some of the benefits of Yeoman that you'll see, maybe you'll start guess it's a good thing and it's a bad thing because it'll make you more productive. And some people, they want to. It's like in the movie Big where what's his name stands up, John Lovitz, I think, and is like, slow down. Don't go so fast. Anyway, so Yeoman has changed quite a bit in the last few months. So Yeoman is a project that addyosmani is a part of. So if you're in the JavaScript community, addyosmani is he's like God. He's like Paul Irish is also a JavaScript god. I mean, those are guys where I would probably have a super shaky hand if I ever had to shake their hand or meet them. But so before, in the past, Yeoman was this tool that you would tell Yeoman, I want to create an application. So Yeoman, and this is all done on command line. So you would say like Yeoman, I don't even remember what it used to be. Now it's called like Yo Web App or something like that. So if you were to type that command in, what it would do is ask you a series of questions. Do you want to use Twitter Bootstrap? Do you want to use Sass instead of plain vanilla CSS? Do you want to do a couple other things? And so you would answer those questions, and then Yeoman would go off and do this cool thing where it would pull down the latest libraries for jQuery or for anything that was associated with your project, and then it would build a folder structure for you, give you an index page. It would immediately start, well, I think you'd have to type one command, but you could have it start your application up. It would open up a tab in Chrome, and it would, as you're typing your code and as you save, it would automatically live reload the page, and it's great. Well, I think they thought that, well, Yeoman is this tool that can kind of stand on its own. It was using these other two tools, Grunt and Bauer. Grunt, I have no idea who made Grunt, but I know Bauer is made by the guys from Twitter. Does someone know who made Grunt? Twitter made Grunt? Oh, okay. So Twitter is responsible for 2/3 of this equation here. So Grunt, they decided, Grunt is good on its own. It's really good at, as you can see here, you can test your project, preview your project, you can build your project. It will concatenate, minify your scripts. It will minify your CSS. It will remove white space. Give you a nice little distribution folder, so when you're ready to deploy your application to production, you just get the distribution folder and you copy and paste it to your server. And then Bauer is another tool that is used for dependency management. So when you start a new application, how many times do you find yourself going to, like I just did when I went to the Google hosted libraries, I grabbed the latest version of Angular, or I'll grab the latest version of my mother-in-law's calling me. Yeah. You're doing a good job, Kyle. I'm watching you. So yeah, Bauer will go out and grab you can tell Bauer what packages or what libraries you want, and it'll go out and it'll hit GitHub and it'll pull down all of the most recent versions of those, and it'll add them to a folder for you. So you don't, when you're ready to start a new application, it just does it. And at any point, if you want to update any of those libraries, let's say jQuery had a version change, they went up 0.1 or something like that, or 0.1. You can update stuff like that. So let me show you the web page real quick. So yeoman.io, it's kind of what I. As you can see down here at the bottom, they have the 1.0 release candidate. So, I mean, they say they're in 1.0, but I'm pretty sure that if you say you have a release candidate, that doesn't mean you're actually out of beta yet. So, that's right, isn't it? Okay. Well, it's one of those things where it's kind of, I guess you could say it's kind of like Node, where Node hasn't come close to 1.0, and they've been at 0.4, 0.6, whatever, and they haven't really hit 1.0 yet. So Yeoman seems to be following that pattern. But so Yeoman has a couple dependencies. So you need to have, if you want to use Yeoman, you need to have Node installed on your computer. You need to install Bauer, like I was showing, or like I pointed out. Grunt, you also need to install that. And then if you want to do Sass, I think you need Ruby and Compass also. But those are all one line commands that you can just rattle off in a couple seconds. I've already got it installed on my computer. I won't make you guys watch me install Yeoman. Yeoman can be tricky depending on your permissions and your connection. Like at Blue Cross, I get blocked from all GitHub protocol files, so I oftentimes will get half of what I need. Not too much fun. So, like I said, you need to have Node. Oh, I forgot Git. Git needs to be installed, and then optionally Ruby and Compass if you plan to use Compass. To install Yeoman, you can install it globally, or you can install it in a directory if you want. So, I would just recommend doing the global install with the G flag there. But to get started, to build an Angular project, they've got all these generators with Yeoman. So if you've been building in Backbone, or I don't even remember what some of the other generators are, but for most of the major libraries that have some sort of MVC type framework, there is most likely a generator for that with Yeoman. So you can search for these different generators. They just released a web page, I think today, saying what generators they have and what's available. So for me to get started with the new project, and I've done this probably 5 times now with the Blue Cross stuff that I'm working on, I would install the generator globally, so I'd do that once. And then within the directory that I want to start my application, I would run yo angular. And that would, like I said, go and grab. It would ask me a series of questions. Do I want to use Twitter Bootstrap? Do I want to use Sass? Do I want to include these other additional Angular files? And it'll go, and you'll see it here in a minute, but it goes out and builds this crazy file structure for you, and you're off and running. And then using Grunt, you can then test your application. So one of the things that I guess I sort of failed to mention with Angular is that Angular really, I think I did mention it, Angular encourages testing, that you test your code. So using Yeoman, if you wanted to create a new controller, you saw we created a user controller earlier. Well, if I use Yeoman to create that user controller, at the same time it would create the test controller in its own test directory. So if I were to run grunt test, every time you can run that command as many times as you want, it would go and make sure that your controller that you've been working on actually passed all the tests that you've set up. And if anybody is really good at testing, I'd love to hear more about it. We could really use some help at Blue Cross with writing tests. So, but every time you visit member services, it'll be a flawless experience if you have Blue Cross insurance. And then Grunt Server is a really cool command. Grunt Server will open up a new tab for you in Chrome, and then it adds live reload to your page. And so, like I said, if you are typing and then you hit save, it'll automatically refresh the page, and there's like no reason for you to not be productive. And Grunt Server is also really cool. I don't know how many people do mobile development, but if you're working on your laptop, and let's say you've got like an iPhone and a whole slew of Android devices, because they're all different. No offense to Android. I love Android. I've got 3 figurines at my desk. All of those devices update at the same time. Adobe's come out with a product called Adobe Edge Inspect is what it is. I've got it installed on my computer. If you don't pay for the subscription, you can use Adobe Edge Inspect to have your computer update and then have one device update at the same time. But if you're using Grunt with live reload, you can have a whole bunch of devices on your desk, and they all reload at the same time. So you can be looking at your application on any number of devices that are on the same network. So, all right. So working with the AngularJS generator, it's really cool. It really speeds things up for you. So single page applications, SPAs, as some people like to call them. not trying to be that funny, but you're over here laughing all. I've heard people call them a spa. I was at a conference, a mobile conference, and they were like, so are you working on any spas? No, I don't work on small pools that go on decks. And that's a hot tub, actually. All right, so routes in single-page applications. Most people know that, like take Gmail, for example. Gmail is a single-page application. You get that list view with all your email. You click on an email. Something happens in the URL where the route changes. So like you'll have like a pound. You'll have the pound in the URL, and then something after that pound changes. That would be a route. Whatever that pound does or whatever it points to would be a route. So if I've got an application and I wanted to create a new route for it, let's say I wanted to create a user route because I want you to be able to view your profile and change some settings or something like that, I would say yo Angular and then colon, let's create a route, and I want to call that route user. So this is where Yeoman goes and does its magic. It will create a user.js file within a scripts controllers directory that I've got set up, and it'll automatically take the app name that I've set at the very beginning. It'll populate it here. It'll do the nice thing with the capital CTRL at the end, like Angular encourages. So it'll go ahead and scaffold that out for me. So in addition to my controllers file, it will build me a view file in my app views directory. So it'll call it user.html, and it'll give you a quick snippet of HTML so you can quickly see that it's working. At the same time, if you were doing this all manually, you'd have to go to your index page. You'd have to add you add the script, the controller to your to the index page. It goes ahead and does it for you. It'll add it to the bottom, and then it'll go into if you have a router within your application, it'll go find your router, and it'll update your router and say that I've got a new user route that uses this as the user.html file as the template and uses the user.js controller. So it just goes and does all that for you really fast. All right, so now it can be dangerous because Yeoman and Angular are, I thought I wrote a match made in heaven in here somewhere, but so the Angular JS generator, here's a link to their documentation. It just goes to their GitHub page, and so if I were to make this larger, let's see. Oh boy. Yeah, sorry. You can see down here they tell you what all the generators are, and so route was a generator that created a controller file, a HTML file for you. It created your test files for your controller. If you wanted to just create a controller or just create a view, you could do that. If you wanted to just create a directive or a service or something like that. All right, so I think we're going to get to the good stuff. As long as I remember where I was. Okay, so all right, here's the thing that I built last week. So I built this thing called Now Playing. I originally built a to-do list application. Saw, I think his name is Brian Ford from Google, do a very similar presentation to what I'm doing right now about Angular and Yeoman, and he made a snarky comment at the beginning about, well, we're not just going to create another to-do list application. So I had originally built something else, and I saw that video, and I was like, well, I can't do that. But the funny thing is, I ended up building a to-do list in the end. So, all right, so Now Playing is something that I like movies. I think most of us like movies. Usually, when you go visit a website that has the different movies playing, it's not that cool looking. I like to know from Rotten Tomatoes, what do the critics think of a movie. It does help me decide. I don't go see movies a whole lot. I've got 2 kids, so I don't get out a whole lot. When I do go out and I do go see a movie, I want to make sure I make it worth my while. So my wife built this really cool design, which you're going to see part of. And then, so I was working on this, and it took me an hour using Angular. And the really cool part about it is it took me 45 minutes for HTML and CSS to actually get the look down, because it's kind of a different look. And then 15 minutes for JavaScript, and I was done. And it just blew my mind how quickly I was able to do this. I'm not saying I'm awesome or anything like that. It's just Angular has a lot to do with it. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to sort of recreate portions of it. I'll use Yeoman to set up the scaffolding. It'll generate my first view for me. I'm going to use some snippets of code to hopefully just copy and paste a lot of the stuff so you don't have to watch me do 45 minutes of HTML and CSS. We'll create a service that first will be populated with static data, and then we'll try to use the Rotten Tomatoes API to pull back JSON. It's a JSON P call. They were nice enough to do that for you. And then we'll create a new route and show you how we can take that data that we've already got and inject it into a new view. So I'm going to sit down. Open. Let's make this larger. Clear. Anyway, so I'm going to create a new directory here called now playing. I will say this, that the name of the directory that you create is what Yeoman uses to create your application. So I normally wouldn't do a capital N, capital P in creating directories. I'd probably just do lowercase. But I want my application to look nice in my code, so I want a capital N and a capital P there. So let me go ahead and get in that. So I'll yo Angular. Safe. So if you are going to minify your code and push it to production, it does a couple nice things to ensure that it is going to be properly minified. Yes. So here's my first question. Would you like to include Twitter Bootstrap? Sure. Would I like to use Compass as opposed to vanilla CSS? Sure. Cool. I don't need Angular Resource.js. I don't. But okay, as I mentioned earlier, I've got some serious permissions problems on my computer. So you can see I got this permission denied thing. Actually, I think I figured out the problem last night. I think I need to change the permissions on this config directory that I've got. But to get around that, I can run sudo. So you can see right here what it's trying to do is run bauer install and npm install. It's trying to do that on its own, but since it doesn't have permission, it can't run those things, so I'm just going to run it manually using sudo. Oh, I gotta have our password. You guys, you know if you've seen the comic where the guy's talking to his wife and says, "Make me a sandwich," and then she says no, and then he says, "Sudo, make me a sandwich," and she says, "Okay." Anyway, so based on there's a configuration or resources or a package.json file or something that was created in this that tells Yeoman these are the libraries that I need. So when I said bauer install, bauer went and grabbed, based on this this particular configuration file, it said I needed. Well, so I'm using Bootstrap. Well, Bootstrap needs jQuery if you want to do some of the cool things with collapsing and other things. Obviously, I need Angular. Bootstrap uses, or Yeoman uses sort of the HTML5 boilerplate. So they've got other things included there, like the JSON 3. So if you're using an older browser, it will give those JSON function or make those JSON functions available to you. And it's got this ES5 shim, which I think who knows what the ES5 ECMAScript 5 shim. I don't know what that really does. Oh, okay. Gosh, I'm showing how little I actually know. Yeah, I just use it because it works. And then bauer install was the one function I needed to run, and then for me to actually get this into my application, I need to do npm install. So I don't know if you guys have used Node before, but there's the Node package manager. If you do npm install, it'll install all of the dependencies that are needed for your application to run. So I'm going to do sudo npm. So here's where it goes out and grabs all this cool stuff from npm, and it's kind of fun to sit here and watch this list scroll by because you'll see some weird library names in there. I think I saw chainsaw. Yeah. Okay, so here's what it ended up doing is it went and grabbed all this stuff that is required for these other things to work. So if you can see most of this stuff here at the bottom is related to Grunt. Okay, so and can you make Finder larger? Well, just trust me with this. Yeah, I don't. Okay, so I apologize to whoever's in the back and can't see this. What we've just done is we've used Yeoman to create or scaffold out this application for us. It's gone and grabbed all the latest libraries that we need. We've got a test folder, so all of our test scripts are sort of initialized, so you better test your code. All the node modules that we need for Grunt to work and for Bauer to work, and then it created this app directory that is going to actually contain our app. So if we were to actually run this application using Grunt, what it's going to do is it's going to hopefully open a new tab in Chrome for me. And this code was just automatically generated by the guys from Yeoman. I've never used Karma before, but it's the testing framework that they've chosen. They used to use something else, I think Jasmine, and I've recently switched to Karma. So a couple things to look at here. We've already, it puts me on port 9000. It's got me on localhost, so I've just created my own little server here. This is running. You'd be able to visit this if you're on the network and you knew my IP address. You'd be able to hit this. That actually requires one change in a Grunt file, but it's already used Angular to run the first route, so it's already gone to the default route that I've got set or that they set up for me. I'm going to open in Sublime. And I'm going to look in my app directory. So I didn't have to do any of this. This is all HTML5 boilerplate. You can see that it's created the ng app directive with now playing app in there. That was all based on the directory that I created. It's got this, one thing I haven't talked about before is the ng view directive. That's this. The ng view directive is for kind of loading templates or loading files, HTML files on the fly. This is kind of how the single page application works with Angular. SPAs, if you will. It added, they're trying to get me to use Google Analytics because they like Google, because they are Google. And then you can see down here, this is pretty important. Actually, that's all the farther it scrolls. Here are all of the Bootstrap files. If you used Bootstrap before, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can use. It's gone ahead and grabbed all of those files for me. It did not grab the completely minified where I've got all the things in there. So I can kind of pick and choose which ones I want. It's got jQuery in there for me. It created there's a controller up here that it went ahead and created for me called main.js. So I'm in pretty good shape in just a couple minutes, and an awful lot was done. And this was, it doesn't normally go at this pace. You would rattle off a couple commands and you'd be on your way. So that's just running Grunt Server. So if I were to stop my server and run just the grunt command, it'll go ahead and do the build for me. So this one's pretty cool. It will concatenate all these files for you. It will minify them. It will even, I don't know, sometimes I feel like it creates like dot versions for your own files so that if you don't have to worry about caching when you upload a new one. So you can see right there, like it created this 91189D45 scripts.js file for me. So I don't think I'll ever run into any sort of caching issues. But what we've done here, in addition to my app directory, I now have a dist, or a distribution directory, where they've done the nice things for me. They've included the 404 page of favicon, or favcon, depending on who you talk to, a robots file, all of my scripts. You saw before I had probably 20 different script tags on the page. I now have 2. All of my styles have now been minified down into one style sheet that I'll upload, and then I've got a views directory that contains my major chunk of HTML. So that's just scaffolding for Yeoman. So let's go ahead and do something. This is where it's going to get really interesting. Sort of the final result. Do this. If you ever are curious about what I'm working on, this is a dangerous site to visit, christiankyle.com. We do not have an index page, so you can see pretty much everything I've worked on or thought about working on. If you need a baby pool, I've created a Flash baby pool. I mean baby pool as in guess the due date, or not the due date, guess the actual delivery date. I think it works well. Anyway, so we'll go to /nowplaying. Okay. So this hit the Rotten Tomatoes API, brought back all of the movies that are currently showing. I just thought it'd be cool to show the movie poster, the synopsis, what the critics think of it, and then add this watch later button, which is actually my to-do list that I snuck into this thing. It uses this is not going to work on your normal IE browser, so it uses CSS transitions. You guys can't see this, but I think it looks pretty cool. So, we've got it's all CSS, so, and I thought I hooked up the arrows, but I didn't, but I think that's pretty funny. Grown-ups too got 6%.
It's gone down since yesterday.
Okay, so if I clicked, I guess you can see this on here. If I clicked Watch Later, it should do some sort of confirmation. I got lazy and I didn't do it, but if I were to hit this new route, so you can see down here that as I hover over my Watch Later list, you can see I'm going to go to a new route called Watch List. I just give a smaller view of the synopsis, and I can say that I watched it. And what's really cool is when I click Watched, it'll go and update this service that I've created that has this model that has this one JSON object in it. When I say Watched, it just remove it, and then it just updates the screen just like that. I didn't have to do anything. I just removed it from the array, and my view automatically adjusted. So, all right, I'll try to do this the best. I've probably just ruined this. So I've got a couple additional style sheets that I'm going to paste in. Roboto font. I don't know if you guys have tried it, but does it really? did you? I don't know if you noticed, but the developer tools. I just noticed this today. If you look at the developer tools thing, I think on the network tab and some of the other tabs, they're using Roboto. So it's like this super skinny font. And I'm lucky enough to have a Retina display Mac, so I can actually read the stuff. But yeah, that's what happens when you work on iOS stuff. You get one of these cool Retina displays. Of course, I've got 17 minutes of battery remaining. Look at that. There's a. Where's my bag? Does anyone see what up there is?
I was in the laundry mine.
Oh yeah, and you get this really annoying new power adapter that's not compatible with any of the other adapters. So, okay, while I have this moment, you guys think you'll start using Yeoman? I'm not here to plug Yeoman, but when I started using it, my weekend projects they got so much faster. I mean, my friends and I play, my coworkers and I should say, they are friends. But it's different because I'm playing video games with my coworkers, because I used to just play with college friends, but now it's coworkers and stuff. So we played Madden together, and we found that when you play the new Madden, you can tweet the result of the game when you play somebody. So they've got the Twitter API hooked up to it. So using Node, I built I hooked into the Twitter streaming API. So anytime anybody tweeted something from one of the certain accounts that we had used, it would push a score to this MongoDB database I had set up. And then using Angular, I just built a really quick interface. So we were able to create a quick schedule. We were able to have the scores to update as people were playing, and it was done in a weekend. And you can't do that when you're using. I mean, you could do it, but it goes so much faster when you're using these new tools. So, all right. So I copied in a couple style sheets. Got this huge monster chunk of data, which is old, but it's okay. Let me hook in this nav bar that I'm going to put that. Yeah, I know. Because I'm going to go grab the actual CSS file.
Does anybody have any questions
while I'm fiddling?
Watching Kyle do his magic?
Does anybody want to try to get Yeoman installed tonight? Because I've run into a couple issues with installing it, so I have a couple ideas on how to permissions. Oh, sorry. Hang on a second. We'll get to you. One of them.
So one of them was that Chrome was not. You couldn't be seen.
Huh.
All
right. Well, we'll try it again. We'll see if we can get through it. Okay, in the back.
So you guys are using Angular at work?
Yeah. So, and I'm sorry though, for the sake of the recording, I'm going to repeat what you ask, so we can have it. So the first question was, are we using Angular at Blue Cross? And we've started using it. We've got one project that's in production right now that Luke built. So if the Affordable Care Act is going to affect you and you want to know how it's going to affect you, you can go, and if you have Blue Cross insurance, you can, actually if you don't have Blue Cross insurance, you can go and see what your potential subsidy might be from the government.
Or if you want to see an Angular app source.
Or if you want to see an Angular application in the wild.
Yeah, we have that one, and also we have some logged in type sites for producers.
So the other question was performance. When you guys start using Angular, you guys like did some type of analysis of like memory footprints, speed, and this kind of things. How compare like
So-
what using before?
Actually, Luke, I've got a great
Do you,
answer to this.
do you have comparison?
I have a great
Or
comparison.
repeat the question.
Okay, so the question was performance increases if we saw any major performance improvements, or actually if we've seen any problems with going to Angular versus using what we were previously doing. So, for example, Blue Cross's website and has tried to get a quote. Hopefully you got a quote. This particular application is a few years old. It uses normal. It's a gigantic jQuery plugin. So jQuery plugins a couple years ago, that was the way to go. So we got this was released the day that I interviewed with Blue Cross. So I can only take credit for the maintenance for this. But so this uses the jQuery, the library, and I did a nice little note because I've got some numbers. It's not on my mobile. From updates.
Now you mentioned Angular uses jQuery or?
So Angular has jQuery Lite built in, so they kind of took some of the like. I don't know that it might be the selectors. There's a whole list of if you go onto the Angular documentation and if you were to do a search for JQ Lite, you would see everything that's available to you. If you want to use Angular and jQuery together, a lot of people encourage you to put your jQuery script first and then your Angular script second, or Angular after jQuery. So it will by default use the jQuery selecting, or the selection engine, or whatever they use. Anyway, so back to the performance question. I've got like a text file, development. Maybe it's in my rate quote. No. Anyway, so I did an analysis of page load, of network requests, of the actual payload that's downloaded, and this version of jQuery, or this version of rate quote versus the new one that I'm building using pure just Angular, and it has jQuery and underscore involved, but we saw a dramatic increase in the number we went from about 80, this has about 85 network requests and on page load, and it also downloads, I think it's like 1.5 megabytes or something like that. It's pretty significant. With the Affordable Care Act, more people are going to be buying insurance, so we needed to make sure that what we have can get to the screen fast, and we also need to get to any device that people are coming on. So we opted for Twitter Bootstrap and Angular, and we saw a decrease of 85 network requests down to 18 network requests to I think the page loads in 300 milliseconds, and the payload was like I think it was about 350 kilobytes. So I mean, we cut things down big time, and part of the reason is because you're only pulling in the HTML and the scripts that you need at the time you need it. So I guess they call it the load to paint. It's fast, and if you've got a 4G phone, it's going to be ridiculously fast. If you've got a 3G phone, it's going to be faster than this. And I even went and built a mobile version of this. This is our mobile version that uses Bootstrap, so it's responsive. And this uses backbone and underscore. And I thought I was being really slick with this because I was using require. And once again, I'm only loading what I need. But my Angular application even beats this as far as payload, number of requests, and the I guess DOM ready, how long that takes. So I haven't seen any reason to worry about performance with Angular. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's some of the smartest developers that are out there that are working on this. And when you've got guys at Google that say, I want to build something because the current libraries aren't addressing the real issues, I'm pretty sure Google's going to say go for it, and they're going to give them a bunch of time and money and resources. So
I will say, as far as benchmarks, I know Angular is in certain contexts, but for what we have, it's fast enough. Not, I think there might be a case where you have a just doesn't fit. Maybe it doesn't perform to something else, but for our purposes, there hasn't been an issue with it.
okay, so I'm going to try to hustle this up. So I've added a couple of style sheets. I need to start my server to do that. So hopefully my page looks a little bit different now because I've added a couple style sheets. There we go. I'm using these gists on GitHub, so I've kind of work. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this main file. So you can see right now, like when you says it's got LOLO, you now have HTML5 boilerplate. I'm just going to do this really quick. That is not cool. So now we should have sort of my base framework. This is kind of how I started. I just coded up one movie, and then I kind of moved on. I don't know why it's not showing. This may be the part of the presentation where you're just going to have to just be like, you know what, Kyle, I believe you. Oh, right. I downloaded these really cool Roboto fonts, and actually, no, Font Awesome. I don't know if you guys have used it, but it replaces. You can use if you use Twitter Bootstrap and Retina display is important to you. You can use Font Awesome because they've got all of the same icons that Twitter Bootstrap has, but they're all vector. So it's a nice replacement. So let me drop this font directory in here. Nope, not there. Okay, now we're starting to see something. This actually isn't going to work because I've got the wrong style sheet hooked up in here. And anyway, so what I originally did was I started off with populating things static the way I would want it, and then I went and created a service. Yeoman. I'll open up a new tab. I'll say Yeoman. So using Yeoman, the magic of Yeoman, it now created a script services, now playing service.js, and then it created the associated test with it. So if you were to look at my scripts directory services, my now playing service, went ahead and did all the nice stuff for me. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So let me drop. Big chunk of data. Do that. Data. This isn't going to work. You know what? I'm just gonna. I know this is kind of a letdown, but the code is on GitHub.
So I linked to the slides and the
That's Christy. I'm gonna show you the sort of what I was just trying to do. So for this to work, it's really small, but created an article tag, and then I did my ng repeat, just like I did with the list. I had a movies array full of movie objects, and because it's creating that local movie object right there, with the Rotten Tomatoes API, each movie has a title, it has a synopsis, it has the ratings, critic score, it's got all these nice cool sources for the images. I did a bunch of things that you can't do in Internet Explorer with Translate 3D and doing. One of the things that I had to think about is the Rotten Tomatoes API is not always going to return, say, 12 movies or 16 movies. It kind of depends on what's actually in movie theaters now. So I had to sort of take that into account when I was working with my styles. So I was able to use some of my Angular variables within my styles, which I don't know anyways else to do that other than with like jQuery.css with your select on there. So that's really cool that you can just kind of do it right there. I know it's inline styling, but we're also doing click attributes, so get over it. Yeah, so sorry about I knew I wasn't going to be able to get through this because I was going to run into some issues, but like I said, it took 15 minutes to write the JavaScript for this and was able to come up with something that looks like that. And thanks to Christy for half of the design. So,
What did you change this to?
So
Can you show them it won't look.
So my wife's a freelance designer. She used to work for Lulu.com. She has designed so many book covers for authors at Lulu. It didn't work.
Does it show up on here?
No. Maybe it's taking forever to download something.
Well,
anyway, so yeah, my wife's a designer. She's done a lot of she's done a lot of book covers, and if you know anybody who's written a book and would like a custom book cover, it's pretty cheap. You get 3 options. kndesign.net. That's my wife. So, all right. So questions? Okay.
Go ahead and ask Kyle any
Yeah,
questions you might have.
If anybody wants to help with any of this stuff, I love this stuff. I do it all the time. And
the caching strategies for finding stuff in text. Some of the problems I've had here. All living in real time, so it's stuff to index. I've read a couple tutorials on it.
Thankfully, no. I've seen a whole bunch of articles about the hash bang. We could go that route. I don't know that you can do that using Angular. I don't know that you can tell it that you want to change the way the routes are working. I haven't had to deal with it, so I don't know. Has anybody else done anything with single-page applications and trying to get them indexed?
So one nice thing with Angular is that you can actually kind of forego the single page in some ways using show and hide. So you can put all your content on there and do show and hide to kind of fake it. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it does work to fix it. I know I've seen people have done all sorts of stuff to try to work around it, but I don't know. You can cheat and like put in your robots file to go parse those files too, potentially. So I just want to show, and it kind of goes off of Kyle's stuff here. How many people are familiar with Chrome apps? Okay, so it kind of blew my mind when I found out about these, because I was like, oh yeah, I guess those are a thing. So these are oriented towards desktop instead of mobile. So there's this space that people kind of forget exists, which is desktop web apps, and in the browser. Apple's doing something kind of similar with the App Store. Chrome apps exist in the marketplace for Google, so it's the same concept as an App Store, but it's for the browser, and it's not really for mobile at all. It's for you're looking at desktop audiences. So these two things here, I'm going to get all the mice mixed up here. So these are Chrome apps. So they exist in the New tab, or how many people have done Chrome extensions? So those are essentially the same thing. It's just how you publish them and things like that. So I'll just show you real quick. So this one is, all it is, we'll call it an app. It really just directs the browser to go to a specific URL. So you might recognize this, right? So one thing that's really, like I was thinking about, if you work for a company, one thing you can take to them is, hey, for $5, we can, instead of doing a mobile app, where you pay $25 to get on the App Store, you can pay $5, get in someone's new tab browser, like in their browser window, and all you have to do is link to a URL. And that's, so there's a potential for market, I don't know, the thing is, I don't know, based on number of hands I saw, nobody really knows about that, except that you might see it periodically in your browser, and people, I don't know how many people explore a lot, but so that's one option. Let me go ahead and do, let's see here. Oh, I know, I'm in Canary. So,
what slideshow framework is this?
This also is reveal.js. Yeah. So you have three different things that you can put up on the marketplace. You can do installable web apps. So those are so either like a public hosted one, which is what just the link to somewhere is, and then a packaged one, which you push a zipped file up to the marketplace, and they kind of provide it for you. There's different contexts for them, and then themes and extensions. Obviously, themes are just the browser themes, and then extensions are anything you've done. If you've installed anything up in this part of your toolbar. So all of them have the same essential pieces. They're zipped up packages that include a manifest and then whatever assets you want. You upload them to the developer dashboard, and then they're on the marketplace. There's this cool little graphic that if you're thinking about, oh, hey, I have an idea, I have a web app, an existing web app, what can I do to put it up there? It kind of helps you decide, all right, that you follow one train of thought. If you want to do something that's small and doesn't really affect the UI, it's more about providing a full-featured tool. That's a packaged app. If it's just something that's going to affect the UI in Chrome, that's more of an extension. So that decision chart kind of helps you figure that out. So you get access, if you do the packaged apps, you get access to all sorts of cool stuff outside of like a normal web app, where you can consume APIs in your JavaScript, things like Chrome storage. So you have access to the identity stuff for doing OAuth. Notifications, you can actually do desktop notifications through Chrome to someone's desktop. So it gives you some features that if you're doing mobile apps, it's not the same, obviously. It's a different experience. But the other nice thing, so any of you who are entrepreneurs who have little pet projects like everybody does, I think, in this realm, you can do just like you can with the mobile app store, you can charge for your apps as you see fit. They have, I don't know how competitive it is. I think it's 5%. So, I don't know how. Has anybody done iOS? Like, what percentage do you get in the mobile marketplace? Oh, really? Oh, okay. So, I mean, it's a little better percentage, I guess, but it's also a different audience, clearly. So you can they have built-in payment systems through Google that you can use, and then you can also kind of wire in your own if you need to. So I've put some resources out here if you're interested in doing it. I'll just show you real quick, and I think then we'll call it a night. I have a lot of pet projects. So, yeah, Tapeworm. I'm a Python guy, so Tapeworm is my Python code minimizer. You feed it something, and no, you eat it, and then I can't remember how it works. Yeah. So essentially, the one that links to a website, all it has is it has some icon exist here. So the now playing, and I just whipped up some vector graphics real quick. So Christy did not do those graphics. Let's put it that way. You whip up some icons. You tell the manifest here that you're going to link to a URL, and there's some other options. Obviously, I'm not going into much detail, and then that's all you do. And then once you load that in, so in Chrome Canary, you actually can do these without packaging them up, so you can do some development in it. So you can just load. So like, I can add and remove these at will, but you load an unpacked extension, and it takes for whatever reason my hard drive is filling up really fast for some reason. So now playing. So you just point it to the folder. You don't have to select a file or anything. Select it, and it just loads it in. And so then that one, because that's a hosted app, you don't ever launch that. Obviously, it's just something that exists on this page. The regexer, I just made up names as I was going, but so this one is more of a packaged app. So it's, think about all the Angular stuff. You can actually wire. So you do your Yeoman stuff, wire in like a full-featured web app. You would do a build on it, and then the build would then need a manifest. So the manifest for this one looks a little different, still has similar things. So you feed it a script file. The script file uses the Chrome extension or the Chrome API to then launch an app, which so that one does. So that one launches a window, and in here, so I've got Angular running, and I can do things like a regex tester if I wanted to. So ABC doesn't work. Let's test a different. Okay, so that's true. So you can do some cool things, and this is like bare bones example. Expand your mind, and you can kind of go all over the place using storage, and you can do persistent. So one of the things in like the code labs that they have is talking about storage, where so hey, let's say I have a regex, you can do save this regex so I can reference it next time. You can do so it's persistent data in the browser, and it doesn't have to be synced up to a database, but you can do that too. Anyway, that's kind of the extent of just real quick. I kind of felt like nobody knew about them, so I thought, hey, well, I'll tell people because there might be a use for it somewhere. But it's something cool where, especially I think for like thinking about my corporate context, quick, easy, cheap way to say, hey, let's just put a link out to this cool thing we made, out to this. No one may see it, but you didn't lose any money. Just it's $5, something like that. Anyway, thank you all for coming. If you do have questions that don't get answered tonight, or you run into problems, Kyle, you can always post stuff to Google+. We have a Google group for those who haven't signed up for that. If that's your your mode of communication, and we also have a Google community, so you don't have to be in all of them. I think people thought you did, but it's just more, I'll try to make sure that people get whatever information they're signed up for. But thank you all for coming, and who all here is from Atlantic BT? Thank you guys for hosting. Hopefully we'll be back again sometime. I'm going to try to make the rounds. Are all of you in Raleigh for the most part? Okay. So we'll try to do kind of like all the other meetups do and circle around. But yeah, thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again in a month or so. Okay.